Welcome to Dataless You. I'm Paul, coming to you from Brooklyn. Today we're going to take a look at a hot topic, and that is the New York City ban on big soda. So, because this is Dataless You, I'm going to put this issue in its philosophical context, and so really we're looking today at, as you see here, the battle between John Stuart Mill and Mayor Michael Bloomberg. So let's start by taking a look at Mill's position. Mill was the great 19th century British philosopher, and he's famous particularly for his essay on liberty. So let's take a look at a quote from that essay. "The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. His own good, either physical or mental, is not a sufficient warrant. He cannot rightfully be compelled to do or forbear because it will be better for him to do so, because it will make him happier in the opinion of others. To do so would be wise or even right." So here we have what has come to be known as the harm principle. In other words, governments can only intervene in the lives of individuals if they are specifically intending to prevent harm to others. So this principle is going to be crucial as we take a closer look at the issue of big soda. So, on the other side of this cage match, we have Mayor Michael Bloomberg, portrayed here as the nanny. This ad was put out by big soda corporations to try to get us to think of Bloomberg as a nanny, and it says, "You only thought you lived in the land of the free." In other words, Mayor Michael Bloomberg here represents paternalism. In other words, government sort of knowing best and intervening in the lives of its citizens in order to help. So, I'd like to begin by pointing out that paternalism is alive and well in America. There are many instances of paternalism or of government intervention in our lives with which we seem to be perfectly at peace. For example, factory safety. You may want to work in this factory. You may desire earnings, income, but according to government law, you're not allowed to work in an unsafe factory. Similarly, a simple example of paternalism would be seatbelt laws. You have to wear a seatbelt in America when driving, or if you're riding a motorcycle, you have to wear a helmet. And of course, recently in New York State, there's been a ban on trans fats. This is another one of Mayor Bloomberg's great initiatives. He's trying to establish himself as the great health guy as he nears the end of his third and final term as New York's mayor. Bloomberg seems to be really trying to establish his legacy as the man who tried to make America, or at least New York, healthy. So, examples of paternalism are clear, and they are a part of our system. So the real question is, what are the boundaries of paternalism? So I've listed some hot topics here. We're not going to go into all of these today, but the individual mandate in Obamacare is a good example of a more controversial brand of paternalism. The individual mandate, of course, mandates that all citizens must have health care. If not, you pay a tax, a kind of penalty tax. Of course, gun control, another big issue, perhaps for another video. As you see here, there are all kinds of issues. Essentially, we're asking, what is the role of the state? Of particular interest to me would be a close investigation into regulations on the market economy, especially the trading that goes on Wall Street, but that is for a future video. So let's get back to big soda. The story is Bloomberg banned the sodas. Sodas larger than 16 ounces, and there was a great backlash. Big soda corporations put on a great advertising campaign. This one says, "Don't let bureaucrats tell you what size beverage to buy." You see a man holding up a soda, kind of like as Lady Liberty would hold up her torch. And of course, individuals too fought back. and blamed Bloomberg of running a nanny state or an overly paternalistic state. So what it comes down to is a cost-benefit analysis on big soda. And much of what I am talking about today you can find in greater detail in an excellent essay on this issue by Cass Sunstein, and that's in the March 7th issue of the New York Review of Books. My apologies to Mr. Sunstein for stealing many of his ideas and presenting them here today. But we're going to slow down here because this is the interesting part. The pros, right, for big soda include the sheer enjoyment of drinking lots of soda. That itself is a value. You know, many people love delicious meals and big sodas and maybe unhealthy burgers, and that in and of itself is a value. Also, and probably the most interesting value, is the idea of autonomy or liberty as an end in itself. So again, we Americans love making our own decisions. We love our freedom. And brief disclaimer, I am not a communist. I am not a socialist. But I do believe that in America, there is a kind of overly strong attachment to the notion of liberty. And I am using this video today to subtly or not so subtly critique our, again, strong attachment to freedom or liberty. I believe that we now live in an interconnected world, a vastly global system in which each and every decision that individuals make influence everyone all across the globe. And because of that, we need to look more deeply into ourselves and make decisions about, well, the limits that we may put on our freedoms in order to help others. So let's take a closer look. The cons of the sort of ubiquitous drinking of big soda are fairly obvious. Yes, we love big sugary sodas, and we also love big burgers in America. Look at that freaking burger. We even love burgers with names like the quadruple bypass burger and whatever the hell this thing is. But the upshot is obvious. Americans are fat. In fact, 67% of Americans are overweight or obese. And that, frankly, is a problem. You see here, the darker states are the more overweight states. Some of those states have greater than 30% of their citizenry currently overweight. Now, where it becomes an issue is the cost. The cost of obesity to society are immense. I looked up a stat that said last year the cost of obesity was about $190 billion to society, and that is incredible. Individually, it's about just over $1,000 more a year for an obese man, and even $3,000 or more a year for an obese woman. So I think this brings us to the real heart of the debate. When looking at a law or a proposed law, such as the ban on big soda, we have a lot of values in conflict. And some of them are fairly clear or straightforward. For example, autonomy in and of itself. We like to make our own decisions, and it feels good to make our own decisions. And that is important. That is certainly a value that is undeniable. But at the same time, our decisions do affect others. And at the same time, we may not be able to make the best decisions all on our own. So, for example, I don't really enjoy wearing my seatbelt, but I know that experts know better than I do, and that they recommend I wear a seatbelt, and so I'm okay with it. And while I may have enjoyed trans fats in foods that I've eaten, I also know that experts, health experts, have come to see that trans fats really aren't good for me, and so I'm happy that they're trying to get them out of my diet. So, in other words, I personally, and now we're getting to my views, I do believe in a word, leadership. I believe that the greatest among us should lead. I'm a little old-fashioned. I believe still in the philosopher king. I believe in great rulers like Ashoka Mayor, who have led their states or kingdoms to greatness through enlightened leadership. And similarly, I do believe in experts, and to a degree, I do believe in the findings of science, in this case, behavioral economics or behavioral psychology. I believe that these findings can help us make better decisions. I don't really have time to research seatbelt laws, trans fats, diabetes, etc. So, essentially, I rely on others to help me with these things. I mean, to be perfectly frank, if I weren't married, I would eat like a slob. Lots of takeout, lots of cheese and crackers, lots of instant pizzas. But because my wife is a wonderful cook, and because I defer to her expertise in this area, I am healthier for it. And, I know that's a microcosm example, right? That I rely on my wife for health and eating choices often. But essentially, it's the same idea. In our interconnected world, I think we do need to, at times, rely on others to help us make better decisions. So that brings us here to even John Stuart Mill recognized limits on liberty. And so I bring you to a quote from chapter 5 of his essay. If anyone saw a person attempting to cross a bridge which had been ascertained to be unsafe, and there were no time to warn him of his danger, they might seize him and turn him back without any real infringement of his liberty. For liberty consists in doing what one desires, and he does not desire to fall into the river. So this quote demonstrates that even John Stuart Mill, the great champion of personal liberty, recognized that at times, we need to help others because of our, you might call it, privileged perspective on the situation. So, the solution, in part, and again, I would refer you to the work of Cass Sunstein. This is all of his thinking. In short, he argues for what he calls nudges or mild paternalism. Really fascinating stuff. Essentially, psychology and behavioral economics have found that, well, lo and behold, people make mistakes. They tend to not think about the future enough. They tend to overvalue things that happened recently, and again, not understand probabilistic models very well. And in short, Professor Sunstein argues for what he calls nudges. So let me give you some examples of nudges. As you see here, all kinds of contracts come with default rules that help protect people who wouldn't otherwise have the wherewithal to think, before I sign this, I might want to protect myself. Well, this is a kind of classical nudge. It's written in there into the contract. In short, so people don't get screwed, Also, and you can read here a list of all kinds of possible nudges that the state may make to, again, sort of improve our choice architecture. But a couple visual examples. If you walked into a grocery store and this was the first aisle, well, you're bombarded by packaged food, pre-packaged food. whose health content we all know is not as good as that of fruits and vegetables. So an example of a nudge would be just to mandate that when you walk into a grocery store, you see fresh fruits and vegetables or fresh food first. Not a bad idea. Another nudge kind of currently in debate would be moving cigarettes out of the eyesight of children who walk into a deli. Any deli here in New York City, any bodega is sort of a cigarette haven, and as soon as you walk in, you see them. And the idea is that children staring at cigarettes in a deli is essentially tobacco marketing. Here you see, in and of itself, an example of a nudge. This advertising campaign from New York State, sort of urging delis to move their cigarettes out of the eyesight of kids, or just, again, start trying to raise awareness of how this is, in and of itself, tobacco marketing. So as we look here at one of my favorite sort of representations of this issue, this is a New Yorker cover. These two seem sort of huddled in an alleyway with police lights on them as they attempt to drink a gigantic soda. I'd like to sort of bring this video to a close and again make my rather impassioned argument that I do believe that while freedom in and of itself is an important concept and value, it just may be possible that Americans are a little too strongly attached to their freedoms, perhaps unreasonably or even neurotically attached to the notion of freedom. Also, I think that new findings in behavioral sciences raise significant questions about Mill's harm principle. So, yes, government should only intervene with the intention of preventing harm to others. But I think now, given behavioral economics and behavioral psychology, we have greater insight into how the decisions of an individual do, in effect, harm others. And lastly, I wanted to endorse Mr. Sunstein's ideas, particularly his notion of the nudge. And I think that though individual liberties ought to be protected, nudges for the greater good of our interconnected world seem like a good idea to me. So I'll leave you with an image of Lady Liberty. Hopefully this has provoked some thoughts. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, or you can always email me directly at nygriffin@gmail.com. Today we've applied the thinking of philosopher John Stuart Mill to the hot topic of big soda ban here in New York City. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the future.